uh, Becky Bailey, who was the head of the department at the time, had pulled out a couple looms that had been put away in one of the dorms. You know, in the attic of one of the dorms, they store a lot of old things that we're not using, or the theater department has things down there. And um, she had these looms that used to be in our sculpture room, and that was weaving. And that was, you know, when I started working here 10 years ago, it was 25 years ago. So I guess that's 35 years ago that they put those looms away. And I was not very interested in it, but I went to college here at Meredith and kind of focused on fibers as well as art education. And then I got my MFA at ECU and focused on weaving and fibers. And that's when I really got into weaving. But my true love for weaving started when Bill Brown here at Meredith helped me get all of those looms out of one of the dorms and bring them down to Gaddy Hamrick. And so now we have a dedicated weaving class again here in the art department at Meredith. And like Taylor said, I'm an assistant professor here and I teach fibers, weaving, 2D, 3D, and I'm the program coordinator for art education. So my students that are here tonight are a mix of art education and studio majors. And they are in Art 735, which is a teaching and methods course that focuses on elementary. And this piece on the right is actually one of my works that was just in a faculty exhibition here at Meredith. And if you go to the gallery webpage, if you Google Meredith Art Department Gallery, you can see there's a little video of me talking about some of my pieces, as well as other faculty talking about their works. And you can see a interactive video of the gallery exhibition that just recently came down. So to start, we're going to be using what you might not think of as a loom, but a ceramic tile. Or if you don't have a ceramic tile, I have some other options to share with you that you could use. A loom, traditionally a floor loom looks something like this picture here on the left. And there's tapestry looms, an inkle loom, which is a type of loom that weaves like a strip, like belts, a tabletop loom, rigid heddle loom. There's a lot of different types of looms. But I love to think outside the box and think about what could be a loom. And I often do a project where students either incorporate found objects into their weaving, or they use a found object as a loom. So this piece on the right is one of my works also, and it's a piece that I found at my father-in-law's house, and I guess he loves to collect old, like rusty metal tools, and this is he said it was like a hay baling tool, like a hand hay baler. So I guess you took that tool and you put it in, and then you moved the hay bales. So I decided it was a loom and wove on it. And we're going to be using a ceramic tile, but you could also, I have some other examples of things that I've used as looms. A frame could be something that you use as a loom. I have this book that somebody gave me, and it's called Weaving is for Anyone. And it's a pretty simple book, and it's fairly old. It's not one that I use a whole lot, but I like having it around. And I thought I could even use the cover of this as a loom and weave on it. I've seen people use matchboxes. So tiny little matchboxes could be the tiny little loom. And I often have students that like to use a tree branch. So maybe a branch that goes out in a Y shape, and you can use that as a loom as well. Materials that you want to have close by, and if you need something, I can give you guys a minute before we totally get started, and wait and see if anybody else has any questions. But you want something to weave on, like the ceramic tile. It could be a book, a picture frame, or something else. Various yarns. So whatever color scheme you want, I packed some Meredith-like colors, and am using some similar to that tonight. You can also use embroidery floss. That works really well for this project. A tapestry needle, but it's not necessary. I often go without the tapestry needle. So I have a little plastic needle. There's also a little metal needle. Either plastic or metal. Just a plastic fork is fine, but you can also use a metal fork. And it just said my internet is unstable, so I just want to make sure. If anything happens, I'll run back over to Gaddy Hamrick if you guys can't hear me or if I break up. It's basically what you would use on a loom. That would be the beater bar, which beats the yarn into place. So we're going to use a fork because we don't need a whole big thing. So any questions about materials, any materials you have or don't have and that you're trying to find something, or if you guys want to just take a minute to go grab some of those things, you can do that as well. Feel free to unmute though and ask me any questions at this point.
Emily, I'll also watch the chat for you so you don't have to do.
Thank you so much.
So if you guys would rather type it in the chat, I'll kind of monitor that for Emily. But looks like I don't have any questions in the chat right now.
Okay, great. With the yarns as well, I encourage the students to use yarns that were similar in size if you are indeed going to use this as a coaster, which is the functional part of it. However, you know, I will often do a functional thing and I'll end up liking it and it'll go up on my wall. So you can choose to do it either way. But if you are going to put a drink on it, you want the yarns to be about the same size so that they don't wobble too much. It looks like many people are coming back. Let me scroll through. For those of you that I can see, it looks like most people are back. Also, we'll have time after I go through this. Weaving is even at this stage can be slow moving. So I'll go through the process, but then it may be necessary for me to go back steps and show images again, or we'll hear from the students and see the choices that they've made on their weavings that they're working on. Okay. All right, so step one, we are going to warp your loom. And the warp is the vertical yarn that goes through your loom. So it doesn't need to be so strong, but like this yarn breaks very easily. And if I'm wrapping it and then I'm trying to weave into it, it'll be a little bit difficult to keep it in place. It might snap on me and I don't want it to do that. So, you know, this one I can pull on and it's not going to break. I know embroidery floss would be that way. It would not break. So you can give it the, you know, strength test. So you're going to tie it onto one end. You're going to choose the warp thread, and that, you know, it's going to be part of your color scheme, but this is the one that I'm working on right now. And while you can see my color, and I've actually incorporated it into the weft, into what we're the next step, it's not the most important color. So if your favorite color is blue and you want a lot of blue, and you're also using, say, white and green, then you could have one of those colors be the warp, because that might make more sense if you want to show more blue. Or it could be all about blue too. All right, so when you get that yarn ready, the first thing I do, and I'm going to move my camera so that you guys can see this a little bit better. And I'm just going to tie it onto one end. So I wrap it and tie a double knot on there. And I just tied that on. And then I'm going to evenly space it. And I did it over the one that I've already done. I would say on a square tile about this size, maybe about 8 to 12 warp threads. So wrapping it 8 to 12 times. And then when you get to the end, you can choose. I've done it both ways. You can tie on to your first knot, or you can tie on to this last warp thread there. I think it works a little bit better to use the fact that this already has a string there. And then I tie that on. So I've got my warp. And this one now has a double warp on it, where you can use different colors if you want to. And you can space them out farther and then put another level on there if you wanted to. So feel free to, again, type in the chat or unmute and ask any questions about that step one. I have a piece that I brought in that we actually did this last semester in my teaching methods class. We made clay tiles. And so this is where I got the idea from. It's sort of a popular middle school project right now that I've seen on, you know, Pinterest and stuff like that. We did a clay tile, and then we actually put the notches in there so that you could, you know, wrap it around and it'd be evenly spaced, and warped that and then wove onto that tile.
Paula says, do we cut and tie the end once we finished wrapping?
Good question. Yes, you can cut it, but you can also, one of the things I do just until I'm finished with my warp is to keep it safe. If you want to and you have nearby a piece of tape, you can put over that. And then that way, if something was to snap, you could tie it back on. But yes, you can definitely cut the ends, or you could tuck them under to keep them out of the way, and then turn it over, and you're going to work on the front side. So the side that you didn't tie on. And for those of you, if you've finished, we'll wait a few minutes just to make sure that everybody is caught up with us a little bit. You can be thinking about what your next yarn is going to be and what maybe you're going to start with as a color scheme. You can also think about, I'm, creating these different stripes or patterns. Is there a pattern you want? Is there a color scheme that you want? Do you want, 3 colors that repeat themselves? Or would you want, you could also go with red, white, black, white, red, where you create a pattern that way. So if you've finished your warp, think about what yarn you're going to use next. And I start by getting a piece of that yarn, and you can thread your needle if you have one. If you don't, we'll just use your fingers. The old-fashioned way, the really old-fashioned way. One of the textbooks I use in my weaving class is called Women's Work, 20,000 Years of Weaving. And I love using passages from that and thinking about stories that, we know, words that we use today, like vocabulary words for weaving, are so interesting when you think about the warp and when something is warped and those words. And the opening between the yarns where you put the weft in is called the shed, which is where you put things. And if you were to be using a shuttle, which is the carrier device, where our shuttle is our needle right now, or our fingers. But I just think that's interesting that weaving has it's so much a part of our culture that we don't even know it sometimes. I've been using an ancient text, or a very old text, that's an Old English folk song that it must have taught weaving to kids, because it's got all the vocabulary words in there. And it reminded me of something that might be in The Hobbit, where they're singing little songs.
Okay, Bonnie asks, do we tie the new thread to the needle, or do we just thread it through?
For the next step, are you talking about the weft?
Yes.
Okay, then that's next. And what I'm going to go to, I'll go ahead, and if we need to come back to this too, we can. Whoops. So choose your weft, yarns or thread used to weave horizontally into your warp. And for a small format, you may want to keep it simple with 2 to 3 colors because it's such a small space. But, you can also weave a rainbow if you want to. So to start, I'm going to show you plain weave or tabby weave. I'll also give you some variations, but what I did with this is all plain weave. And with the one that I'm working on now, it's the most basic weave. It's what a cotton Oxford shirt, that fabric is made from. And it's called plain or tabby weave. And that is over 1 warp thread, under 1 warp thread, and then repeating. So
Steve and CJ are asking, how long of a piece do you need for the next thread?
That's a good question, and it's a tricky question. I can't say for sure, because you're making the choice as to how long you're going to weave it, and you would need to measure, if it's 2 inches wide and you want to weave a 1/4 inch, then you'd have to, there'd be a math equation that you could do to figure that out. But since we are doing this and you have some choices and we're, having fun with it, I won't make you do math equations tonight. And basically what you want to do is just start with a piece that, isn't going to run out right away. So maybe 2 feet or a foot to 2 feet, and maybe not even that much. If you're going to change your colors a lot, then you maybe don't want that much. But it would depend on that. You can always add more in, and you can always cut it off early. So don't worry about what size to start with, except for, you don't want a huge amount and waste a bunch of yarn either. Was that helpful?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to pull this forward again. Actually, I think I can put it up here. So I'm going to use this other one to show as an example. And I'm going over 1, under 1, over 1, under 1. So every other one. And then I'm pulling that all the way through. This is where you get to make another choice too. Do you want to weave the whole thing? Like I gave myself some room there, but you could start way down at the bottom if you want to have a nice, big weaving covering this whole tile. You're also going to pull your thread almost all the way through. And I'll show you one way of finishing this thread, which when you're weaving, you're going to be making a selvage. So if any of you do any sewing, or if you are weavers and you know what I'm talking about, then you know that the selvage is the self-made edge that happens when you weave back and forth on making the fabric. So I'm going to tuck this in by going under 1 or 2. I'm just going to do 1 this time and pull it down. This is where I may want to, use my fork to put things in place. I can move it around. Then I'm going to take it and over, under, but the opposite way. So whatever I did the first, this is called the shot. It's a line of yarn. And whatever I did the first time, I'm now going to do the exact opposite. And then what I'm doing here is to make that self-made edge there, I'm pulling this last yarn that's on the end away as I pull my weft thread, and there's a tension that's created from these two. And if I pull too hard, it will pull this in, and if I don't pull hard enough, it'll make a loop on the end. But I see we have some questions, so I'm going to come back up here.
Yeah, Paige is asking, Martha just needed to be able to see the screen. I adjusted it. Paige is asking, when do you do the edge? Later?
No, you're making it right. That's another good question. You're making it as you go. So the edge is basically just folding it over and putting it that way. But you always, when you start a yarn or you finish a yarn, what I was talking about is that end piece. So I'm going to weave a couple more shots. And then once I do that, I'm going to show you on this one. Once I do that, I've got these threads that are hanging off. I can cut these if I want to and keep them because I want to clean that up afterwards. But I do that at the end once I've done some weaving. So I'm going to do a couple more and I'll keep doing that. It's a repetitive thing. So if it's not making sense right this minute, watch me do it a couple more times and I think that will help. So the self-made edge is going to happen right here, the selvage, by going underneath and going back, you know, doing my over, under. And I'm pulling that. So that's me making it right now. So I'm putting that into place. I'm going to jump ahead and show you. I've got some variations and then some tips to show you. And that's pretty much it for my my presentation here. So we'll come back and if anybody's having any trouble, we'll come back and get you caught up. Here's a couple of tips. So this one, where it's circled, it's showing where the weft is too loose. And this one is showing where the weft is too tight. But we are in the art department, so you don't always have to follow the rules either. And one of my favorite artists is Sheila Hicks, who is in her 90s and still weaving and still showing at major galleries and museums around the country. And she intentionally does a very tight selvage because it creates almost like a sculptural piece. And it's an option. So this is just, I'm giving you the rules, but you guys can do with them as you please. Okay, so variations. There are variations on plain weave. Plain weave, a variation is basket weave. So if you look at this image in the top center, it's over 2, under 2, and you have 2 weft threads. So basically you're using 2 instead of 1 for both the warp and the weft. And there are twill variations and satin variations. A satin weave starts out as under 1, over 3. And that's what gives you the satin, because if you're using something that's really soft like silk and you're mainly having floating weft where it's not weaving in, it gives it a very smooth texture, whereas the basket weave would have a coarser texture. With the weft, you can explore size, color, space. So my weaving is very tight, but I can have some variations. Does anybody in 206, any of my Art 735 students, do you guys have any variations that you can show at this point? They're fighting over who wants to talk first.
Okay, I did this thing. Oh my gosh, what's it called? It's like interlocking.
Okay, so you were doing a tapestry technique.
Yes.
Okay,
It's not really a variation, but
Well, Rachel does, 'cause, well, kind of. Are you doing different texture?
And then just basket weaving. Or not basket weaving, plain
You're
weaves.
not up there.
okay. If you want.
This is mine. It's just plain weave and Ryan knots. So
and what are Raya knots?
I don't know how to explain it well. Don't know. They're like pieces of yarn that you can place on the warp and to make cool textural thingies.
Yeah, so you're putting a knot on there that, and you're making a loop and you're knotting it onto the warp, and then you're creating texture on that. Taylor, do you want to share? Have you done, and I'm talking to, sorry, Taylor McGee is in the classroom.
I haven't done variations, but I was doing tapestry techniques.
Okay. And do you want to bring that up and show us what you've done so far?
Can you see it in this camera? Is that? Yeah.
When we come down, you guys can share them again when I come back to the classroom, and I'll give you guys a chance to show close up. But
Okay.
I want to introduce Taylor because Taylor is not one of my current students. Taylor's an alumni, and she is my artist in residence this year. So we started a new program in the art department for art majors that leave Meredith. And, you know, one of the great things about being an art major at Meredith is you have this beautiful department with all the tools and room and tables and supplies and tools that you need. And then you go out into the real world and you have a tiny apartment and you're working, you know, really hard at your first new job. And so we've given them the opportunity to come back and they apply for a residency. And then if they get the residency, they come in and they have a working studio space where they get to work and create work. And they also get to have an exhibition at the end of their residency. But they in turn help out in classes and, you know, do demos and work alongside the art professors that they work with. So we have usually about 2 or 3 every semester.
And I want to plug a little bit. Taylor and I have not had the opportunity to meet just yet, but I have been working or connected with archives. Taylor did a exhibition where she had, Taylor, correct me if I'm wrong, where you had alumni submit pieces of art. And some of those works are being donated to the college. And so we're hoping to bring an event to alumni that talks more about Taylor and her her being an artist in residence, and then that exhibit that she did. So you may have another opportunity to speak with her.
That's awesome. Okay, so I'm going to mute you guys. Let's see. I think that's it. Yeah, now I'm at questions. So what I can go back to here is when you're at this point, you can make some choices of if you want to change your yarn, if you want to change your pattern, colors. Again, if you're using this as a coaster, then you want the yarns to be about the same size so that it's not wobbly when you put your drink on it. But if you're using it as, you know, an art piece, then you can add different textures and sizes in there as well. What questions do you guys have for me about your weavings? Anybody having any problems or issues?
Feel free to unmute yourself and ask if it's easier than trying to type it out in the chat.
Oh, I see it.
Unmute. I would like to say that the little squares or the rectangles with directions and examples are too small to be seen. I can't read it.
And where is that? On this page, like this one?
Yes, up to your left. Up there, but it's on my screen, but it's up to your.
So is it not showing my whole screen on your screen?
Yeah, it's the whole screen, but then that little bit is just like 1 inch by 2 inch, and I can't read it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Beth, that might be a setting on your end.
Okay.
That's what I was thinking.
If you should see a little section that says view, and you can swap between your views.
Oh, let me see. Okay, let's see.
Page says to expand the screen to full screen.
Okay, it says standard.
So see if you can select full screen, and that will
That did it. That did it.
Yep.
Does it look better?
Thank you.
Yeah. And you all, I am recording this, and then Emily also provided her slideshow that I'm going to send out to everyone after. So you can refer back if you want to make some more coasters or practice your weaving more. You'll have this video and the slides.
Hopefully one day in the future, we could actually do a weaving workshop in person where we could do something more complex too. I'd love to do that. I'd love to do something with the big floor looms that we have.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I can't wait until we can all be together.
I know. I'm going to put my mask on and go down the hallway, and then maybe they can use my computer so you can see their weavings a little bit closer. And then if you have questions for us about the program or questions for the students or anything like that, we can do that as well. Does that sound good, Taylor?
That sounds great to me.
So will she be covering how to finish off the loose ends?
Yes, I see your chats, and when she gets into the classroom, I'll ask her those questions.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So I turned all mine off. So
Okay.
Okay, Emily, we have a couple of questions.
Hold on, just, we're in stereo now. Hold on. All right, can you hear me?
Hold on. Okay, Emily, I've muted the classroom. I think we're gonna,
Can you hear me now?
yes,
Okay,
yes.
and there's no feedback.
No.
Okay, I heard the question too, that what, the one about the ends, so I'll go ahead and answer that first.
Okay.
Okay. So I have, sorry about that. My computer and then the Zoom board that we're using in here, they compete with each other. So I have to mute myself and use the Zoom board's sound. There was a question about how to finish off the ends. So if you're tucking those ends in, you'll end up with little tails like that you can just cut off. If you've got pieces that are hanging off on the sides, you have choices where you can take your needle and stitch them in. So I can kind of, go behind my weaving, stitch it in there, and then cut it off and hide it that way. And if you guys want it, you can't see it. If you want to show me something, you can also unmute and hold your weaving up and show it to me. And if there's something that you're trying to figure out what to do with, I might be able to help you that way too.
Can you show us? I can't see you or I can't tell which person you are.
Oh God, yes, okay. Let's
Can you stop screen recording maybe or that?
stop.
Screen sharing, sorry.
Yes, maybe that.
Turn that off and then.
All right, so if you guys would go to, okay.
That's good.
Yeah, I spotlighted you.
All right, but you can still hear me, but now you can see me, right?
Right.
Okay, then let me do that again. The joys of technology. I know more now than I ever thought I would, and now I know I don't know a whole lot. So if I've got a tail hanging off, I can either stitch it into my weaving. I can also stitch it behind my weaving. And then once I do that, I can then snip it. And because we're not taking these off our loom, sometimes you might be doing a weaving where you take it off the loom. That we're not doing that unless you decide to do that on your own. The coaster, the loom, is actually part of our project, so it's one less step we have to do also. Does anybody have any of their warp threads hanging out or the weft threads hanging out on your loom right now? Okay. Okay, would you want to show us, and maybe we can, if you unmute, then you will be the speaker.
I think I am unmuted.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just joined you. So
Okay.
I have no clue, but I'm just looking at what you did. I don't know if it matters how many warp threads,
Here,
anything, but I have the first end is sticking out a little.
Yes, that's perfect. Actually, that's a great place. So what you can do is to take that warp thread and tuck it in either one or two of the warp threads in.
Okay.
Rachel, did you say you had one too? Okay, so Rachel's got hers, and these are the raya knots that she was talking about, where you're adding on that texture. And this is a tapestry type technique that she's working on right now. But she's starting a new yarn. So if you were going to start a new yarn, then you would take that and I would just tuck it. And I just ignore it until I've had a few more threads, and then I can cut that extra one off. But, you know, if Rachel wanted to make that part of her composition, she could leave it on there too, if she wanted to. I'm gonna have you guys go ahead and show what you've done so far, and we'll just take turns with that. Taylor, if you want to go up, and Taylor's going to show you a tapestry technique when she comes up and shows hers. Oops.
Hello. Emily, I have a couple of more questions too, Taylor, before you start. When doing the basket weave, it looks like it makes sense to have an even number of warp threads. Is that right?
Yes, but you don't have to. You can also just have one be one. It doesn't have to be in groups of two. You can still do it without that.
Okay, and then the page says, I think I'd do better if I had a loom that was already made. My base keeps falling, it keeps failing on me. User error, I know.
So I had to restart.
I want to see it.
And actually it started out pretty good, but then this thing got messed up. And so can you see that
oh, right, your warp thread?
Yeah, and I can't
turn it around. Turn it around for me. Let me see the back. Where is that one on the back? Because it might be something that.
Right here.
So one thing you can do is you can take a piece of tape, tighten it, and put it in place.
Okay.
And then get the rest of the weaving on there. And that might work.
Okay.
Usually because like I said before, 20,000 years of weaving, somebody figured out something. Like there's all these mistakes that can be made in weaving. they know that, and they've made them. I've made them. And so there's a lot of like solutions for small problems too. I think it's one of the best problem solving teachers is weaving. All right, is there any more questions? Taylor, Twine?
No, we're called up.
Okay, so now Taylor McGee is going to show you her tapestry that she's working on.
Okay, so I'm doing a tapestry technique. which just means I'm basically creating shapes with the yarn. And I'm doing like more organic shapes, but you could also be very geometric and create, you know, squares and rectangles and triangles. So in order to do that, you would just do the plain weave like you're doing, but you stack wherever you want your shape to end. So if I want this green to end here, there. And I'm gonna go back with this one more time. So instead of again going all the way to the end, I'm just filling in this shape and creating it here with my yarn. I'm saying this backwards. So. That. And I'm gonna just leave that there for now because I might want to add more later, but I'll show you how I connect another color and create another shape in this space. So I'm gonna use this hot pink yarn. And there are a couple of different ways you can go about connecting your yarn together to make shapes. So one way is that, so I'm gonna start over here and I'm gonna fill in this shape and I'm gonna continue with my tabby pattern, just going over and under. So there's 3 things you can do. One thing you can do is you can kind of use your tapestry needle to pull apart the yarn so you can see that work thread. And you would weave the other color in kind of between those spaces. So using that common work thread as a way to connect your shapes. And going back like that. Another thing you can do, and then you would just push those together. And that's what I've been doing on this one. So you'll kind of see where the colors interlock. Another thing you can do is when you get to the other yarn is you can actually interlock the weft thread itself. So instead of using a common work thread, you would take your needle and go through this other color and pull it through. And this will give you kind of like a cleaner line. So instead of having this overlapping, this will give you a more like clean division between your shapes. So I think that one tends to be better if you want to do like geometric shapes and you're doing a lot of squares. But for what I'm doing with this like organic design, the connecting work thread works well. And then the other thing you can do is just not connect them. So when I get to this other work thread, I could leave a space and not connect it. And that's just another design choice. If you wanted to leave open spaces or create splits, right? It's called split tapestry because you are creating a split and you're weaving and not connecting the shapes. And yeah, those are a couple different ways you can connect colors and make shapes in your weaving.
Thanks, Taylor.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions up there?
None in the chat.
Okay. The Zoom board shows that we do, but I guess because we haven't checked on the Zoom board. So I'm going to have, Kristen, would you come up here and show yours and have the students each show theirs? And if anybody would like to share from Zoom, if you have one that you'd like to share with us, we'd love to see it too.
To see myself. Okay, this is what I'm working on, and I'm just doing plain weave. And this is just one yarn that has different, it has all like the rainbow colors in it. So I thought that'd be cool to try to see. Just simply plain weave, you can see how the yarn goes.
Thank you.
That's what I do.
Yes, awesome. I saw that question that came up. Can you use the other weaves like basket and satin on this? Yes, you can. And I will jump in here and I'm gonna get a different color of yarn that shows up a little bit better. And I'll show you quickly the basket and the satin. I don't think twill on a loom this size, it's a little bit more challenging to do, but you can do it. So I've got my 2 threads here. This is a really weird color combination with my brown and pink and this bright green, but it is what it is. So I'm going to put both of my yarns through there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go under 2, over 2, under 2, over 2. All the way to the end. And again, I'm going to tuck my tail in there. The other thing you can do is just to leave them and then cut them off. And because it's a tile, it's probably just going to stay in place. It's not like you're going to, you know, make a shirt out of this and wear it. It's not going to go in the washing machine. So that's the other thing that you could do.
One little tiny square at a time.
So now I'm going to do the same thing going back the other way, but exactly the opposite. So if I went under 2, over 2, now I'm going to do over 2, under 2. And that basket weave, it's a chunkier weave. It's got a more of a texture, which I kind of like. And I would continue going with that. Under 2, over 2, back and forth. And I could change my colors. And now if I wanted to, I could go back to plain weave and I would just do 1, under 1, over 1. For satin, let me get another color so you can see the difference. It's really the same thing. They're all plain weave variations. So you're going under 1, over 3, under 1, over 3, under 1, over 3, under 1, over 3. And like I said, if you get to the end and you only have 2 or you only have 1, you can just ignore that and keep going with it. The other thing I could do if I'm leaving these ends out here is I could make a choice to actually go the other way and leave my ends. So then I could make it even and have some hanging off that side. So then again, I'm going, I went under this first one, so I'm going to go over the first one. And then under 3, over 1. And that would be the satin. See the difference, hopefully, with those different colors on there? Did I answer all the questions?
Casey is asking if we want to cut the weaving off of the tile, what should we do to the back?
Good question. So what I would do is I would cut in the middle, but I would only cut say 2 at a time. That way it doesn't all fall off and fall apart. So I'd start by snipping 2 here, and then I'd undo them, and then you can tie at the top. Once you snip it, you can tie at the top and you can tie at the bottom. And that's what will keep it in place. Here, I can do it with this one. So I'm gonna snip 2 on the back here. And I snip in the middle so I have enough room on both sides. So I'm wearing my woven necklace here that I made a week or 2 ago for Scholars Weekend. Usually the students that come to the art department for scholarships and have their interviews, they get to do workshops with our students, and they weren't able to this time around. So I made a video on how to weave your own necklace. So I thought it was appropriate that I wear it tonight.
That's so fun. I hadn't even thought about what Scholars Weekend must be like. I remember my Scholars Weekend was so much fun, but with COVID, they don't get that same.
Yeah, it's a little different. The interviews were great. I was really impressed with the students that were able to talk, like be in an interview with faculty and be on Zoom. It's hard enough, I think, in person, but it seems sort of distant when you're doing it that way. But they did a great job. So, okay, so here I'm taking off 2 at a time, and then I'm tying the top and the bottom. Then you can choose to cut off your tassels or keep your tassels, or you can do some sort of like braiding or what's the word I'm looking for? The planters.
Oh, macrame.
Macrame. I knew they'd get it. The macrame, there's techniques that you can do where you can braid those ends if you want to take it off the tile.
You would start with an app.
Okay, so we're past time here, but anybody have any questions for students or for me? I want to be conscious of your time. We are still having class, so we're okay.
Anybody have any questions for Emily or for her students? I know you're all busy creating your work of art.
So I did put my email at the end of that presentation, and it's howardm@meredith.edu. Feel free to email me any questions or send me a picture of your creation. I'd love to see it.
Yes, I would like to see them too. So when I email you all this video and Emily's slides, I hope you'll send me a photo back of your piece of art. And Emily, Martha says, thanks for this. I would happily come to a workshop on campus. Please just don't
Yay.
start it too early in the morning.
No, we can do it in the evening.
Well, if there are no more questions, I'm going to stop the recording.
I would, if you wanted to do like designs that were more than just metric, like if you wanted to do something figurative, like the stream method they were talking about, could you place like an image behind the loom and sort of copy the shapes that, or like try to mimic the shapes of the image? How would you go about doing that?
Yes, you're exactly right, Mary. Hi, Mary. Good to see you. You're breaking up a little bit too, but I think what I got was that if you're trying to, to make a design on your weaving and make it a little more figurative, using maybe the technique that Taylor McGee was showing you, then yes, you can create your design and you can put that behind this loom and put it on the tile, and then follow those shapes and colors and match that up, definitely. That's actually what my my weaving students are doing right now. They're doing a larger scale tapestry. We have tapestry tabletop looms that are about this big, and they're creating their designs on there. One student has a beautiful image of the Duomo in Florence that she took when she did her study abroad in San Sepolcro, and it's really cool. So yeah, you can definitely do, once you get into tapestry, you can, there are people who do portraits in tapestry, so you can really take it to another level.
Okay, I've been interested in that, and that's why I wanted to take a look at the base of how you guys do it. Awesome.
Thanks for the question.